Welcome to Unquiet Minds, the podcast that amplifies the voices of individuals from diverse backgrounds as they bravely share their stories, struggles, and hopes for a better future. I'm your host, Evelyn Lancaster, and in each episode, we delve into the depths of intersectional identities and the challenges faced by those living in America. Today, I want to thank you all for tuning back in as I took some time off to get some behind-the-scenes ideas I wanted implemented in the works as I move forward attempting to make this a more meaningful and impactful experience for all involved, which is why I'm extremely excited to bring on one of my biggest fans and the very first subscriber of my podcast, my mother, Evelyn Lancaster. While we have certainly not always seen eye to eye with one another, she will always be one of the most important and influential women in my life, and a category held in my heart that is reserved for a precious few. Mom, I know it's taken a lot for us to be able to get to this point together over the years, but I want to firstly say thank you for sitting down and taking the time to help me as I explore these facets of my identity, my background, and my family history. Today, however, I really want to explore a few things, with the first being, how have you been coping with the fragmented nature of our family's recent communication structure? I know personally it has been rather necessary but also difficult to distance myself from particular family members in a push to find some personal clarity, and I'm curious, how have you been dealing with those issues when faced with them, either with our immediate family or even with your family members, some of whom you're currently in town visiting?
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. Um, it's been difficult, but I have learned to allow people to own their own space and to do what's best for them because at the end of the day, they have to do and learn how to cope with what life has dealt them. And I don't want to overstep anyone's space and say, hey, you have to deal with this person because really, you just have to really love each other and just really learn to accept what it is that you all want to do. And sometimes you need that space from each other to learn and grow and to accept each other for who they are at the end of the day.
I certainly get that, and if anything, I respect that a lot, and I appreciate that a lot. But I guess when I asked that question, I asked that really wanting to know, at the end of the day, you have always been someone who I feel like in my life has always been a very important and very vocal part of it. And for a long time, for a few years, it feels like you, along with a lot of my family members, I feel like I haven't had the most healthy or sometimes like even existing communication structure with you all. And like I said, for myself, I've struggled a lot with it. I've tossed and turned, kind of going back and forth. Even this morning, I know there was a moment where I thought about reaching out to my older brother, JR, and I didn't because I feel like I know how these conversations sometimes go, but I don't think I often think about the other person and how they're feeling when you put those walls up or when you don't reach out. And I know for a long time, I put those walls up with you. Like I said, I felt like they were necessary. I felt like I had to put those walls up to kind of find that personal clarity for myself and to figure out who I am without, feeling influenced by anybody else or by something that someone else might say, even if they are someone as important as the most affluential woman in my life. So I have to ask, knowing that this hasn't been an easy time for me. There's been a lot of times where I've wanted to reach out, where I've wanted to just almost forget about all of the drama that we all go through and just be there with you. And I guess I have to ask, like, do you ever have those moments? Like, has that been difficult for you? Like, knowing that you have someone you might want to reach out to, but you don't believe that it'll go well when you do, so you just decide not to.
Yes, of course. It's a lot of relatives. I call them relatives now because I have learned the difference between relatives and family. And sometimes God put that distance in between you all so you can learn to grow and become who you need to become and allow them to be who they are and who they become. And so sometimes you need that space and time to kind of really set back and just really know what it is you really want to talk to them about, or what you need to tell them, or what they need to hear, or vice versa. And you don't always have to communicate with people to really understand what's going on. Sometimes it's just, you know, okay, he's doing well. I'm doing well. We're doing well. We don't have to actually talk to each other all the time, because sometimes people, when they do too much together, it cause hurt feelings. And even though you are our siblings and I am the mother, I can't take sides. I can tell you what you're doing wrong and I can tell him what he's doing wrong, but I can't take sides. And as as a mother, as the head of this family, um, I know my place. We all have a spot to play in this role of life. And that's one of those things I step back and say, I'm allow God to take over this whole thing. And he's going to sort it out. And he's going to let whoever wrong, let them know you're wrong. Whoever's right, you're right. And just deal with it in that way, so no one will be hurt, because no one wants to be badgered every time they pick up the phone, and you don't want to have resentment towards each other. So I just felt like, you know what, at the end of the day, eventually they're going to see what the real issue is, and it may not be as serious as you think it is, but right now in your mind you're thinking this is a big issue. I don't talk to my brother on a daily like I used to, but we have all grown and mature, and a lot of times people grow their own different ways. Some people grow, some people stay still for a while, but we got to allow people to be in their own truth at that moment. So I say, and sometimes, some people say, you know what, I thought about it, but it's been 6 months to a year, but I'm actually going to take that advice that so and so gave me, and I'm going to use that advice. It may have been a whole year, and you're like, oh, now he's listening. But sometimes you have to sit back and let people, you know, take their time and get to the level they need to be at. And it's not for us to say what that timetable look like. But, you know, it's hard when you have 6 children and everyone has their own personality, their own identity, and just, want to live their life the way they want to live it and still be the mother of them all and love them all unconditionally.
No, I definitely get that. And that's another thing that I just have to, in my personal situation right now, being where I am at 26, um, I have to just respect that. I find it a little difficult sometimes to have certain conversations, just because I think there's one thing that I will always kind of not exactly see eye to eye with you or my father on. And this is something that I didn't really want to get too much into it with my grandma when she was on the podcast. But with you, Mom, I mean, we've talked about it briefly, but I don't share the same spirituality as you. I know that the majority of my family are Christian folks, but I myself am not. I was raised in a Christian home. You did create that type of an atmosphere for me. But as I got older, I made a lot of personal decisions that moved me away from looking at Christianity as being my faith. I know even when I say that out loud, there will be some people that almost tune me out in my own community when I say that out loud, just because I feel like it is the one acceptable religion, especially here in America. I mean, let's go back to what this podcast is really about, challenges being faced by those living in America. It is deeply ingrained in our country. So when you say things like leaving stuff up to God, um, I always find a piece of me that, I don't know, twinges a little bit, because in a way I get what you're saying. Like, they're like, even if it isn't necessarily the God that you believe in or that I believe in, we're leaving something up to some kind of higher being, some kind of higher purpose. I am a spiritual person, but I think it's hard for me to separate, when you say leaving things up to God, the Christian God that I have been raised believing in, the Christian God that I have had to come to terms with being someone that doesn't represent the worldview or the ideology that I have when I look at the world. I mean, just this past year, I talked about it with other folks on some outside podcasts, and I've talked with people in my family about it, but I came out as being openly bisexual. That's something that is instantly vilified in most traditional Christian communities. So again, I just find it very difficult to take everything you say to heart, when I feel like not necessarily that it's a scapegoat, but when it feels like at the end of the day, you're leaving something up to a higher being that I have gone to, at least in my life, to come to view as flawed. And I know that that's damning to say to other people out there, but based on the experiences that I've had, I mean, without going too in depth about some of the church experiences that I had growing up as an adolescent, the church was not always the most welcoming place, or even a place that, and I think you can certainly attest to this, Mom, where the people in it were reflective of the ideology that are, held within the text, the holy books that these folks worship. If we're looking at how people live, and don't get me wrong, I know that in the text they say that everybody's a sinner and that, Christ died for our sins, but I mean, we have people who actively engaged in not just sinful behavior, but sometimes it was behavior that it was unexcusable and it was blatant. Like, I remember being an adolescent and being privy to, infidelities in the church. So as an adolescent, that's not something that I should ever be exposed to, let alone being exposed to it in a church setting. So again, my situation doesn't feel necessarily unique, especially when we look at different facets of Christianity and some of the things that have come to light that has happened behind closed doors in churches. So I have to, I guess, ask, when you say that you leave things up to God, I guess, can you clarify that a little bit? Like, what exactly do you mean when you say you leave it up to, your God or your higher being?
Well, when I say I leave it up to God, I pray about it, and I wait on his answer or whatever results he gives me, and that's what I deal with, and he gives me the strength to deal with it. Um and the reason why a lot of people like yourself look at people and say, I don't believe in God because this happened in church, this happened in church. And that's where they call it church hurt, because they look at the people. They're not looking at God. And people are people. We all full of sin. We living in the flesh. And just because they're in the church, that does not mean that they are the church. They don't represent God. There's a lot of devils in the church. And a lot of them sit in the pulpit. A lot of them, they still live in the worldly lifestyle and say they're Christians, and they're doing everything that the world is doing. But it's a price to pay for all of us. If you're not living, if we set rules and God set rules and you're not following those rules, then no matter how many times you go to church, no matter how much you get up and talk in the pulpit, you're still going to hell like anybody else. So to say, well, I don't believe in God because the people in the church did this and the people in the church did that, they don't represent God. God represent God. So you have to stop looking at what other people are doing and saying in the church and look at God. And that's one of the reasons why I personally don't attend a church building anymore, because I don't want to look at the people. I don't want to know what people are doing. I just want to know what God has for me and what he wants me to do. Because if I went on what people say and what people doing in the church, there's no need for me to go to the building. It's just a show, just somewhere to go on Sundays. And I learned over the years, unfortunately, I didn't learn early on when you all were young and get you out of that environment, because that was a toxic environment. Because a lot of things was going on in not just the church y'all really went to, but other churches that we visited and went to for years before that. These people are full of sin and just running rampant and saying, in the name of Jesus, I'm doing this to you because God said. And that's not true, because God don't act like that. And that was only them. And they hid behind saying God said. And that's not true. That's why he said, get your own personal relationship with him. And don't depend on to go through someone else to have a relationship with God. And it's okay to say, you know what, I don't believe in God because this happened, because you have to get your own relationship. And I'm not, the one to tell people what you need to do, because even if you look at me, you say, no, Mom, I'm not doing that, because you're not doing everything you're supposed to do. And that is true. I'm not. But I'm learning. And as I learn, I grow, and I go on to do more and more what he required me to do.
See, and when you talk about, and I really want to pivot on to the personal nature of your relationship with your God. I think, especially moving away from the church, while it is nice to have a community of folks to do anything with, especially when it's sharing something as personal as worshiping, I think that it does have value. But like you said, your relationship with your God is supposed to be personal to you. At the end of the day, when you leave whatever we see as this earthly realm, it is between you and that entity that is going to shepherd you into what happens next. It's up to you guys to come to that, conclusion of what will happen to you. It's not going to be, you and anyone else. It's going to be you and that entity. And when I think about the God, because I'll be honest, like, it's not that I don't believe that there is a God or anything like that. It's just that I don't believe in the Christian God. Like, I don't believe in the God that tells me by being an openly bisexual man, I'm going to burn in hell. Like, that to me doesn't make sense. If anything, I don't even believe in a God that has a heaven or a hell. I don't believe in that being a thing. If anything, I might be alone. I know that I'm not alone. I know that there are people that believe the same things that I believe, but I know in my community I feel alone because there aren't a lot of people that believe in the same type of spirituality that I believe in. And a lot of it, I'm going to be honest, when I think about our history, when I think about our people, when I think about what we have been allowed to see and allowed to operate within, it is the Christian narrative of what a God can be for a Christian American. I mean, even from the time that, we are the descendant of enslaved persons. Like, go to LancasterFamilyHeritage.org and see my family website. We are the descendant of enslaved persons. We, for generations, have had Christianity thrust on us, not even by the people that look like us, but by our white captors. And then from there, we were pushing it on each other. And we were pushing Christianity with a narrative of, again, like something as basic as someone's sexuality not aligning with Christian morals. That is something damning enough to have this person burn for an eternity. Think about how, like, that's forever. That's like, I just, it doesn't make sense to me that is something that could actually exist. What makes more sense to me when I look at other texts, when I look at other religions, I've been looking at a lot of Wiccan text. I've been looking at, people talk about witches and white magic and this, that, and the third. But when I look at rebirth and reincarnation and what some of the purposes of it is to, forget your past lives, but to live a life making sure that you push humanity forward, making sure that beyond your race, beyond your gender, beyond what you in this singular lifetime you exist to be, you need to be pushing people forward, not trying to spend eternity with your specific loved ones, forever in this I guess magical, fantastical place where someone's gonna weigh your sins and your good things and your bad things and tell you whether or not you belong in this place, you belong in that. Inherently, I believe that there is no completely great person or completely good person. There is no completely awful and immoral person. Like, there are shades of gray all across the world, and it's all about your perspective. I can tell one person about Fred Hampton, the leader of the Black Panther Party, and they can say that he was a terrorist, that he, was essentially a criminal, a corrupt individual. And I can go talk to, someone else about Fred Hampton, and they would say that he was an idealist, that, he was trying to really change lives and implement good. I mean, right now, the free lunch and breakfast program, it's a program implemented in almost every single city in every single state that is due to Fred Hampton, a man that the FBI assassinated because he was seen as a black messiah, bringing together poor black folks, poor Latinos, poor Asians, and poor white people through the Rainbow Coalition, starting chapters in every single state, affecting real change. On one side, people called him a terrorist. On the other side, he was held as a hero, and to someone like me, he's a role model. So it's hard to really believe in a religion that is so deeply tied in American politics that we know often talk about a constitution that right now, Mom, we are 3/5 of a human being. The 14th Amendment be damned if we look at the historical doctrine that we still regard today. People on the Trump side or on the right-wing side talk about restoring the Constitution. That Constitution and what they're trying to restore is African Americans being seen as 3/5 of a person. That's indigenous people not having the right to actually represent themselves. That's what they want to restore. It's openly applauding and giving a space for racism without actually just noting what it is. And I think, unfortunately, while there are good aspects of Christianity, don't get me wrong, like, I think that you guys gave me really good morals in some ways growing up by, raising me as a Christian. There are also a lot of, like, bad things that you must turn a blind eye to in order to accept it as your faith. which is why my relationship with God, I'm not like a complete practicing Wiccan where I'm, doing spells and this, that, and the third. I don't do voodoo and I guess completely engage in like mysticism in that way. But I am a spiritual person that does believe in rebirth, that does believe in pushing the human agenda forward, and does believe in a life beyond this life. So it sometimes is difficult to have conversations with folks when they don't, first off, understand where I am in a spiritual sense. But second off, when I feel like they haven't really dissected what Christianity means to them. And when you talk about Christianity, like, I'm really curious, like, what made Christianity like the religion for you? Like, I guess, did you ever, give time or give effort or even think about, just for a second, using the, I guess, the structure of the religion, Christianity that you grew up in, but implementing that in your personal relationship with your God, with the things that you see in this world that Christianity lacks? And I mean, it's religion at the end of the day. It's what you make of it in their personally held beliefs. As long as I personally hold these beliefs in my heart, wholeheartedly, to my grave, like, that is my religion, be it if, I'm the only person that shares it. So in that regard, I guess, do you really align with everything that you see in Christianity these days? People be damned. Not just, I get what you're saying. You're seeing bad people in the church, and so you don't engage with those aspects of the church or those people. But in the religion itself, like heaven and hell, something as simple as your son telling you, I'm an openly bisexual man, and in that religion that you believe in, that meaning that I'm gonna burn in hell, like, does that, you really feel like that's an acceptable way to look at it?
Well, no, because first of all, religion is something man made up. That's clear. That's been clear across the board. Religion is a man made up thing. Some people like, say women can be pastors. That's a religion. People have different things and they start different religions. It's thousands of religions and people make them up. So, having said that, I'm not into a religion. I don't go according to a religion or whatever people want to say is a religion. I'm not into that. I'm only into what God has for me. And it's for everybody is different. Everyone is different. So I can't say what will keep you in or get you in good with God won't keep me in or get me out of good graces. I can't, that's not for me to determine. I can't judge. No one can, because you will be judged for judging people. So it's just like, it's a thing that, so I let people live their truth. And it was hard for me for a while, because I always was, doing this thing like, well, you have to do this. I was raised this way. Because when I look back over my life as a kid, I had my mother's side of the family who were all just very ruthless people. And then I had my dad's side of the family, who my grandmother was a very strong Christian woman. Her grandmother sent them all to church every Sunday. We went to church every Sunday. But then it was like night and day for me as growing up as a kid. My mother's side of the family, they was always fighting and killing each other. And on my father's side of the family, it was peace and harmony. So imagine being a kid growing up in both of those worlds. So I looked at it as like, do I want to live like these people over here, meaning my mother's side of the family, or do I want to live like these people over here, which is my father's side of the family? And so everybody knows me. Everybody know who knows me know that I gravitated towards my father's side of the family. Very few people know my mother's side of the family because I don't dwell with those, and I call those my relatives. If you ever kind of notice, I call my mother family my relatives. I call my dad's side of the family my family. And that's how I really learned how to get around and maneuver my basically double life as a kid. Grew up. I had a double life. So it was just where I had to come in and say, how do I want to raise my children? What do I want my children to learn and to know and to have value? And when I actually got into church and realized, wow, these people are horrible people within the church. They just like my mother's side of the family. But only they walk around and say, well, God told me to be nasty to you, in a sense, or to say this or do this to you. God didn't tell them that, but that's what they were hiding behind. So I had to learn again, okay, this is not what I want for my children or for my family. So I basically kind of walked away from that as well. And I had to deal with a lot of abuse in the home because a lot of people say, well, you're a Christian. You should allow me to say and do this to you. And you should forgive me for that because you're supposed to be a Christian. So you have to kind of weigh out, is this what really Christianity about? Is letting you slap me in my face and say, well, you're a Christian, so you should allow me to do that. And that's where you have to grow and learn on your own and say, you know what? This is not what I believe God is about. And all these rules everyone else trying to instill in me is not what I see God as. So everybody has their own mission and their own personal relationship with God. That's why I say get your own relationship with God. I have my own. Everybody has their own. Is it not that the God I serve? Maybe not.
And I think that's that's the biggest point. Like, it understanding that ultimately it probably isn't the same God that you guys serve. And I think that if I would look at everyone, I would think that everybody has their own personal, individual ideal of what God is to them. And like, that is honestly how I believe religion is supposed to be. Like, it's supposed to be between just you and that entity that you hold to be, your belief for your purpose, for your reason to be here. And like you said, I really want to kind of focus in on that living a double life. If you could understand, yourself, that you had to live a double life between those in your family on your mother's side that, weren't Christians and, didn't go to the church, weren't churchgoers, versus, on your father's side, those who were churchgoers, and, this is the things that they held themselves to, because clearly you see there is a disconnect between the two different groups. The one group, like you said, they're on top of each other, killing each other, essentially doing negative things, whereas there's peace and harmony in this Christian environment where everybody's like following these rules, these beliefs. But what happens when the beliefs of those Christian individuals, and this is where I think the generational differences come into effect with mental health, because even if you're not killing someone, like in that situation where those people, on your mother's side, they were not religious and they were, engaging in the I guess, the worst aspects of what someone could call like savagery, killing each other, doing these like horrific acts, versus, someone who does something that, again, I'm always going to go back to this just because it's something that for whatever reason, like, there's so many Christians that are just completely against like same-sex marriage, but someone who simply wants to be married to someone that shares the same gender. to me, if I'm looking at a household where it's it's a Christian household, everything feels like peace and harmony because people aren't necessarily dying and things like that. But if I bring up the fact that, hey, I want to, marry this man, it's no longer going to be that peace and harmony. It might not get to the savagery of people, dying and killing each other, but it's not accepted in that circle. So you can see how someone, even if they're not, that destitute that they're killing people, doing all of this, this savage, but you can see how they could still have to live a second life, and that's not helpful for them either. Like, and that's where I feel like a lot of folks, when I think about my younger, friends, I've got Kayla, Carmelita, Rodney, myself, like those that we often talked about, like our sexuality and things like that, but it was often dismissed. And we lived in Black Christian households where we knew that there were only certain, I guess, certain levels of a seriousness that we were going to be taken. And I often sometimes laugh to myself when I think about how often you talked about, Rodney and the girls, and how often you were surprised Rodney wasn't dating one of the girls. But I mean, at that point in Rodney's life, he was like open about his sexuality. Even I think the only people that he wasn't open with, and I hate that this is always the case in our communities, especially Black communities, the only people he wasn't open with at that point was his family. And it was the same with me at that point. The only person that I was not open with about the thoughts, the feelings, like not even that I had been acting on any of this stuff. I mean, you guys knew I was bringing home cookie cutter girlfriends all the time. So like, wasn't even that I was acting on anything, but I had these thoughts, these feelings, these inclinations that I knew would not be well received, not just based on like my family dynamic, but also based on how I saw my friends that actively tried to push against that, how they were treated by theirs. And it's difficult to, I guess, say that when I hear you talk about having to live that double life and not wanting your kids to have to live that same one, it's one of those where I feel like that may have been your intent, but I think by doing that and not really creating a truly open atmosphere, like right now, where you're telling me like your relation should be, just between you and your God. Like, it's taken time for you as an adult to get to that point where you're accepting of the fact where you can step back, allow people to get to where they are personally. But I just think about how impactful your mindset now could have been back when we were growing up and we were thinking about what should we, take as our spirituality? What should we believe in? What should we push out there into the world? I know that you were giving us the best rule set and structure that you had seen based on your situation. And hindsight is always 2020. But looking back, it's one of those where I at least have to, address the situation. And I feel like if that was your goal, I don't necessarily know that you succeeded there. And knowing that, I'm curious, like, what would you have done differently?
Well, I don't know what I would have done differently. Honestly, I don't know. We would have took every situation and dealt with it differently. As you know, your dad and I, we were very young when we got married. And so we basically grew with our children. We grew up with our children. It's just, it is what it is. We really didn't have very many role models as married couples. His grandparents were married. So we kind of looked at them as role models, but that's essentially all we had. My grandmother wasn't married. My mother wasn't married. So I didn't know what it was to really be a married woman trying to raise children. I didn't know that. So every day was a learning experience for me. So every trial was just like, okay, what do we do now? Well, what did his grandparents do? I don't think they had to deal with things of that nature, but we made it through. That's all we could say. We made it through. And, everybody had to, kind of roll with it. And, we just, okay, life threw us this curveball. We just have to deal with it. And we would have just have to learn to deal with it, learn to live with it, and accept it for what it is. Because at the end of the day, we just like we love our kids unconditionally. So no matter what they decide to do or what they decide to come, we felt like we gave them all we had, all we knew to give. All we had to give, we gave to our children. So however and your turnout or however you want to live your life, that's really your choice. And we just support you because we love our children. No matter, you want to be married to male, female, whatever. That's your personal decision. And we're going to love you no matter what. And that's where we had to come to terms with a lot of decisions our children have made over the years, good, bad, or indifferent. We love you. We can support you. We can help you. We still love you. And that's where we're at. And that's the conclusion we had to come to. Like, we have to love our kids. And we have to support them.
No, I definitely believe that's certainly where you guys are now, and I appreciate that like wholeheartedly. Like where you guys are from where you guys started. I let me be honest. I have had amazing parents. To everyone out there that's listening, like we have had fights, we've had struggles, we've had trials and tribulations, but I have had amazing parents that have always been in my corner, and that will never be lost on me. And I appreciate my dad, all of my siblings, like even my distant family members. Like I appreciate all of you for everything that you've put into me. But that's not to say that there weren't things throughout my life that I do wish would have turned out differently. But that's also why I think it's so important right now to be able to sit down, have these conversations, clear the air, understand where you were coming from, understand where I'm coming from or where I was coming from, but most importantly, understand where we want to go. Because at the end of the day, I think that no matter how toxic it can be in some of your family dynamics, mine, and I don't want to speak for everybody out there, but my family dynamic, it has always been the one dynamic that I feel like I have the most amount of control with in my life, that I feel the most secure within my life. And that's saying something because I don't always feel secure, in control of anything in my life. But when it comes to my family, and I know for some folks, it might not be your blood family, it might be the family that you've come to create on your own. But that family dynamic that I'm talking about, that's where your comfort is. Those are your allies. Those are the people that at the end of the day, I don't really view any of my family members as obstacles. They're all allies. Even my rivals in the family are allies in my struggle, because I think we all want to see something similar that I can't say for those that aren't a part of my family, that don't hear my story and feel rallied to the cause. Because even with my family members, when I hear the stories that they tell, when I'm reading in between the lines of the experiences that they're talking about, my heart is rallied to that cause. And there are people that look like me that cause that and evoke that feeling, and there's people that don't look like me that cause and evoke that feeling. And those are the people that I feel like are really a part of my family unit. Because when I talk about family, yes, I talk about my blood, like my mother here, but I also talk about all of my family that truly has put into me just as much as I feel like I've been able to put out into them. And at the end of the day, I really do want to thank you, Mom, for being my number one fan in this entire experience of trying to have dialogues like this, grow my podcast, actually create a platform that I can feel proud of and that I can feel like I'm making a difference with. So, thank you for not only being in my corner, being that ally, being that fan, being that friend, but also being a part of the experience and helping me put something out there that I otherwise would not have had the strength to put out there by myself.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. And like I said before, I love you and your siblings unconditionally, as well as Rodney and the girls. I love seeing Rodney and the girls. So, whatever their truth is, no matter what, I still love you guys. So, you know, it's just what I do. I just love as a mother.
Well, thank you, Mom. I do appreciate that. And as always, I've been your host, Marius Lancaster, and thank you for listening. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and never stop seeking the truth.